over me. She's over me. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls of all ages, welcome to the Paranormal Portal. I'm your host, Brent Thomas. Thanks for being here, and thanks for being a part of the journey every night. Those of you that join us, I really appreciate it. It's always a great pleasure to be here doing the shows, and I am always thrilled to hear from you guys. Thank you to all the people writing comments and sending me messages and stuff. It's just a fantastic thing, and I am always honored to hear from you. So thank you all for being a part of the journey of the Paranormal Portal. The phone lines will be open throughout the duration of tonight's show. If you want to call in and be a part of the show, you're welcome to do that. You can call in to 720-923-0500. And again, 720-923-0500. That's the number for fun right here on the Paranormal Portal. So if you have something paranormal that you'd like to share, we'd love to hear from you. And just love to have you be a part of the show. Hold on a sec. There we go. Let's see. I guess this is the last show again. Remember, Mondays and Tuesdays, we're no longer broadcasting live. So make sure that if you want to come check out the portal, you got to do it Wednesday through Sunday. So tonight's our last night for a couple of nights. I'm using Mondays and Tuesdays to get a lot of stuff done and to develop ideas for the show and to develop a whole lot of things that I'm working on, side projects and stuff. So I'm just really busy, and I'm trying to utilize the time to hopefully get a little better caught up. So anyway, if you're still getting the portal, you need a portal fix, you can always look at the 720 plus episodes that are in archive right here on YouTube, or you can check out our podcast. Just released a new one today. So if you haven't checked out the podcast, please do. We'd love to have your support there as well. And whatever podcast platform you're watching on, please leave us a good rating if you like the show. It helps a bunch, and it really increases our standings on the recommended lists. So it's pretty consistent all over. Whether it's a YouTube video, the likes and the comments are really important, or at least some kind of interaction shows the algorithm that people are involved. And the same thing holds true for other algorithms on other platforms. So if you like the shows and you want to help support what we're doing, that's a great way to do it. We'd love your help. So anyway, that's all I got on the front end. So I hope you all are ready, 'cause it's time for bed. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as always on the Night Terrors, Ghostly Encounters episodes, I've got a bunch of stories pulled up, some ghostly encounters to talk about tonight. So I will get started without further ado. So buckle up. I hope you have your libation present and you turn the lights down low, kick back and relax, and I'll do my best to keep you entertained. So the first one tonight is coming from the state of Florida. And this one's pretty short. It's actually incredibly short. So this one will go really quick. And it says, my son went on a field trip a couple of weeks ago to a historical museum in our town. It's located within walking distance from his school, and I'd say a 10-minute walk. Oh, never mind. I already read this one. We're hitting the ground running tonight, ladies and gentlemen. I don't like when I do that. I get busy. I've got so many tabs open and I forget to close some of them. So my apologies. I will do better from now on. The next story, actually, the first story tonight is coming from Oregon, and it has to do with miscellaneous kind of stuff. So that can be apparitions, voices, just many different types of activity dealing with ghosts. So this one says, it was November 8th, 2002. I just moved in with my son to Oregon to live with my aunt, who was very ill, to help her. My friend and I were walking down the sidewalk in town and noticed that some people were getting into a car on the curb. We were talking to each other and didn't look up to see their faces, and after a few more steps, we both felt someone behind us. We looked at each other and then turned around to see a man standing there. He was about 6 foot tall with dark brown hair and dark brown eyes. His body was slim, but he was wearing jeans and a heavy coat, so I couldn't really tell how he was shaped. He stared at me with a blank face, so I said hello and said my name with a big smile. At the same time, the wind blew from behind and tossed my hair around my face, and before I could, he lifted his hand and brushed the hair from my face and said his name. I felt my entire body heat up when he touched me, and a second later, another man walks up and tells him that they have to go. I smiled again and said, well, I guess I'll see you later, I hope, and turned to walk away. And as my friend and I turned the corner, I looked back to see him still standing there, staring at me. Well, I nearly threw up once we turned the corner. I felt like I'd just gone over a hill that makes your stomach flip-flop. When I asked around, I found out that no one knew who the people were and assumed they just weren't from town. A few weeks go by, and I get a hang-up while making dinner. I assume it's a call. And I assumed that it was one of my son's friends and didn't think anything of it. But hours later, after I sent my son off to stay the night with a friend, I went out and sat on the porch. Well, the phone rang, and I didn't hear anything but wind and the sound of leaves. I knew that it couldn't be one of my son's friends because they would be in bed, so I listened and said hello again. A faint voice almost whispered, said my name, and it sounded strange. Excited but nervous, and close is the best way to describe it, I guess, I panicked and jumped up looking around. I suddenly felt really anxious and watched. I backed into the house and locked the door behind me, and the phone goes silent. A week later, I changed shifts with someone and was working late. It was 11:30 p.m. before I left, and on the way to my car, I felt someone watch me. I got to my car and locked the doors. Looking around, I realized that no one was there. I laughed, and just then, I saw what I thought was a figure standing at the end of the tree line across from the hospital parking lot. Well, I start the car, and the headlights flash in that direction, but nobody was there. Oddly, when I got home, as I was walking to my neighbor's to get my son, I felt the same way as I did in the parking lot. After explaining my craziness to my neighbor, her husband decides to walk me home and check around the house to make sure that no one is messing around. The next night, I open my window to my room to let in some fresh air, and I hear the leaves rustling and then a crunch coming from the patch of trees next to my house. I looked out the window but saw nothing, but I suddenly got this really panicky feeling. Unsure why, I just shut the window and ran downstairs and out onto the porch and said, "Come out or I'm calling the cops." Just as I raised the phone, a figure steps out with his hands raised in front of him. Because of the street light in front of my house, I could recognize his face as soon as the light hit him. It was him, standing there waiting. Before I could stop myself, I stepped off the porch and walked towards him. He started to back away, but stopped when I smiled. He reached out, and I took his hand. This is really bizarre. All right, I'll just keep reading because we're already this far in, but this sounds really Twilighty. When I woke up the next morning, the only thing I remembered was taking his hand and the feeling as he kissed me. And then what I thought felt a lot like floating. I didn't remember how I got into my room, and at first I thought I may have just dreamt it. But when I pulled the blanket back, I saw leaves stuck to my socks. I ran downstairs and out the front door, which I noticed was deadbolted, and stepped off the porch into the yard facing the trees where I thought he had come from. I took a step forward and whispered, "Come back." I stood still, listening like a dummy, but didn't hear anything. I took a deep breath and in my normal voice said, "Come back, please." When nothing happened, I turned and started to walk towards my house when I felt a hand touch my shoulder and I froze and closed my eyes, and then I felt both of his hands holding my arms and then slide around in front of me, gently pulling my body backwards into his, and I felt his breath as he leaned in to kiss my neck. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, but this is really twilighty. As I turned to face him, I felt his grip loosen, and when I opened my eyes, I saw that no one was there. I never saw him again after that day, but I still sit on the porch sometimes waiting for him, but he never makes any contact. Although sometimes when I'm outside or walking to my car at night, I can feel him watching. I don't write these, ladies and gentlemen, but I'm here to tell you that's a strange one. I can't say that this didn't happen. I certainly can't say that. What I can say is there's so much that doesn't make sense. There's so much narrative in there that seems to just jump to this weird acceptance and willingness. Whereas, in any kind of situation, we just have those self-preservation modes that we slip into. And I think especially in today's world, when there's a lot of dangers around, and it's not like it couldn't have happened. It's not like it's impossible that it happened, but it just seems unlikely to me. So what was this guy? Was he a spirit? Was he an extraterrestrial? Was he something else? Extra dimensional? I don't know. I mean, I don't know. Apparently comes out of Oregon though. So, if it's true, that's incredible. But I still, it's just so incredible that it's just one of those situations where it's just too much to me. It's just too much. So I don't pretend to understand it. I'm not on the face saying this is a bunch of BS, but my flags are up for sure. My little flags are up going, huh. So I don't know. We run into those stories too, and there's no way to know for sure. I can only source things and bring them to you, hopefully hoping to entertain you. And I will say that everything I bring to you on this show is prefaced as a true story. I never bring you guys fiction. I don't have time for it myself because I'm interested in this stuff. I want to understand this stuff, or at least try to. And we can't understand it if we're reading a bunch of fiction. And that's why I think that the integrity and honesty is so important in these situations, because if someone's feeding you a bunch of fluff, it's only gonna obfuscate the truth even further. So for me, I'm on a journey. I'm on a quest to understand this a little better. And if people are fictionalizing stories, it only causes more confusion. So I'll put that in the definitely unsure category. You can come to your own conclusions. There's obviously people that believe that they have relationships with spirits in a very intimate way. And I don't know. I mean, there's succubus and incubus. Those have been around since forever. So, I mean, there is obviously a precedent for people having supernatural carnal relationships, whether by choice or without choosing and being victimized, but they do happen. I don't know. It's just very strange. I don't think, I will say that if it's real, if this is real, I don't believe it's a spiritual thing at all. I think it's something else. If it's real, because I don't know. It just doesn't seem to me to fit. So anyway, that's my 2 cents, whatever that's worth. But you guys will have to let me know in the comments what you think. But, and again, I don't mean to offend anybody, or if somebody's out there going, why are you being such a jerk about it? Well, I'm not trying to be. But I do evaluate these things as I'm reading them. And it's like, when things, I don't know, everything fell just so precisely. And she was just such a willing participant, dealing with something she couldn't possibly understand. It's very strange. I mean, what would you do if you're walking down the street and suddenly somebody's just like right behind you? I mean, I can't imagine anybody going anything except, oh my God, creepy. I can't imagine somebody going, oh, hi, what's your name? That's like, oh, hey, that's what I would expect. So I don't expect people to go, hi, good to see you. Hope I see you again. That part doesn't make sense to me. I'm sorry. So I have to be true to myself as well. But that's the first story tonight. It was, decent. It was well written. And again, I'm not making any judgments, but that's just my feedback. So the next one is coming from California. This one has to do with haunted places. It's a pretty good sized story. So let's see what's going on in California. It says, my name is Tracy, and I've had several experiences with ghostly beings, starting back at the age of about 5 years old. Well, I'm now about 39, and my most recent, most violent sent me running from Southern California to Northern California. I was living in Reseda, California, renting a room in a house of a friend's ex-husband. I was having trouble sleeping ever since I moved in, and related it to stress at the time. I was lucky enough to meet two people, a young man and a young woman, whom I really quickly became friends with. We all shared an interest in ghosts, ESP, and everything paranormal. One night we decided to go to a park, one that I'd never been to and absolutely won't go to again. We drove as far as we could into the park, but the gate was closed to cars, so we parked in the cul-de-sac type road and started a walk to what my friends had said was a small stream towards the middle of the park. We started to walk down a small hill on a moonless night, and it was really dark. I was in front, about 15 feet of my two friends, when I felt a tapping on my right shoulder. Turning around to see what Doug wanted, it hadn't felt like a woman's hand. I saw to my left a figure on a hill that looked like an American Indian scout or a lookout type of person. The fact that my friends were nowhere near me, about 15 feet away, to tap me on the shoulder sent chills through me. But I just kept walking. I was in good spirits, forgive the pun, and I told myself that the ghost stories we share were just playing games on my mind. The next part I really hardly remember. I was seeing what seemed to be a shadow moving in front of me. And I started to look around for a light source that would be creating it, but I didn't find any. I kept walking, and the shadow grew larger and larger, and was now looking more like a mass of blackness than a shadow, and actually was coming towards me. Needless to say, my mind just wouldn't accept it as anything other than a shadow. I hadn't heard of shadow ghosts at the time. Well, the next thing that happened, I wouldn't wish on my worst of enemies. I was caught by this blackness. I'd taken a step forward and my foot never reached the ground. Something had me by the throat, just my windpipe, and I could not breathe. My friend saw this and came running down the hill, stopped halfway down with fright, and Doug yelled to Jill to go to the car and get it started, because we were going to need a getaway. And he ran to me and grabbed me and half dragged me, half lifted me and got me to the car where Jill was standing dumbstruck by what she saw. Before we had started down the hill, we had teased her that her car needed a good washing. But now we really wished she had, because covering her car was what appeared to be satanic symbols written in the dust and the dirt. They were what? They were ruin symbols that had been reversed mirror images of what we see normally. Doug yelled at her to hurry. I still hadn't been able to breathe, and he was getting really scared. Finally, we got into the car and drove as fast as possible, but to put as much space between us and the park. We pulled over, and I got out, taking my first real big breath of fresh air, and that's where I finally got a clearer memory again. Doug and Jill said that the whole time that we were driving, I was talking, channeling something about an old Indian woman, and it scared them more than the experience at the park. It didn't stop until we got out of the car and Doug had put my hands into clean soil. We got back into the car and went to the nearest open restaurant to talk about what had happened and to calm down. We still have no idea what really happened or what even caused the events of that evening. We went back to the car from the restaurant feeling calmer, hoping that our imaginations had just gotten away from us, and we saw the symbols on the car and knew that it had happened. Not to mention that the next day, I had bruises on my windpipe exactly where I had felt them the night before. Finger marks as if I had been choked by the windpipe, alone, not around my neck, as a normal human attempt. The next day, Doug said that he had a friend that exorcises evil entities and would have him check out my house for any lingering effects. Well, his friend did come over, and right under my bedroom window was a horrid-smelling mud patch where nothing would grow. Much to the bewilderment of my landlord, he asked if Jill and I would leave them to cleanse the house. We went to the store, and upon arriving back, waited for the boys in front of the house, in the car. Both of us were watching the house as if something were going to happen, and realizing this, we laughed at ourselves and then looked back at the house for any sign of the boys when we saw a bright flash of pinkish light over the house. Not once, but twice. A few moments later, the boys came from the behind the house and told us they were successful. I asked how they knew that it was gone, to which they replied, "Did you see the flash of light over the house?" "Yes," we answered. "That was the ghost trying to come back and being cast away. I've put a protective spell on you and the house. She won't be coming back again," and she never did. If anyone else has knowledge of this park in northern Reseda, please let me know. Well, sounds like something horrible happened there. I don't know. This ground here, it has memory. And ground everywhere has a memory, I think. I think the soil remembers, the land remembers. And maybe there are spirits that linger and stick into some areas due to whatever that land was at one time. I'm sure that if spirits are there and if they're watching our modern world and remembering their world or their time, maybe they get pretty angry. Maybe it's more elemental, some kind of nature spirit. I don't know. It's hard to know, but that's got to be terrifying. And that's honestly, that's why I always say some of the worst advice I've ever heard people offer is that, well, ghosts can't hurt you. They can't hurt you. Don't worry. They can't hurt you. And it seems to me whenever you challenge the universe like that, the universe answers with our suppositions or predeterminations of what can and can't happen. Oftentimes it seems like we get surprised, and I'm sure this person got plenty surprised. That's absolutely terrifying to think something grabbed her. Now, I will tell you that I have talked to people, and one of those people is going to appear on our podcast. We're going to be recording it this week, but she's been on this show before on our YouTube channel, and she's an investigator. Her name is Lisa Martin, and she runs a Facebook group called Paranormal Science Lab, and if you get a chance, check it out. She's really top-notch. She's a published author as well. She does a lot of paranormal research and such in the Missouri area, and has written books on the lore and stories of that area. So, but she talks about when they were checking out an area. I believe it was involved with the Civil War, and she said she was walking behind her other investigators, and suddenly it was like she was in a wet blanket, and there was nothing there, but she couldn't move. She was absolutely paralyzed and stuck there like she had just hit a big spider web and couldn't do anything. And she said it was the most terrifying experience she's ever had. And that sounds very similar to what we just read here of this person experiencing a dark shadow, moving close and becoming this mass, and suddenly got you by the windpipe and you can't talk. That's horrifying. That's horrifying stuff. So this does happen, ladies and gentlemen. And this is the thing. You don't have to always provoke spirits in order to get that kind of response. But generally, I think you do. Now, I don't think Lisa did, and I don't think this woman did by the description of the story, or this person. I don't know if it's a man or woman. I guess I assume woman. But it can just happen sometimes. Maybe just your presence is provoking if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's hard to know what's going on for these presences, for these intelligences, and they might just consider the fact that you're there as being a challenge, and they will meet that challenge. Now, in my opinion, I think that a lot of times it takes, and it comes up quite often in some paranormal approaches to investigating. It's like, come on, show us you're real. Show us, use my energy, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh, God, don't do that. Don't do that. Never volunteer your energy to something you don't even understand. Don't ever volunteer your energy to something you can't possibly understand. First of all, you don't know what the hell you're talking to, and you don't know what it wants or what it may not want or whatever. So it's, I don't know. It's like asking a serial killer to cut your sandwich. Here's a knife. I mean, you don't know. So don't go volunteering your energy to anything. That's a big, bad idea. And it's such a common practice. People think that these spirits are just such low energy creatures, and they need the energy of you to make them able to do stuff. And I don't believe that that's the case. I don't know where that idea comes from, where that concept comes from. But and if it does need your energy, then you probably don't want it having your energy. So that's my 2 cents on that. But I hear that every time, and I go, oh God, don't do that. Don't do that. That's bad. There's plenty of reports of them using other energies like batteries. Of course, drain batteries is real common. Fresh batteries being put in, showing full, and 5 seconds later, boom, dead. Not a charge in them. I've also heard it of those same batteries that are showing no charge being perfectly fine once they leave a given area. So it could be a field. It's hard to understand what the hell's going on there for sure. Most people just assume that the ghosts are taking that battery energy in order to do whatever it is they do. Maybe they are, but maybe it's more of an energy field, some kind of a weird energy vortex that we don't understand. And I think that there's probably a likelihood of that being more possible than spirits draining the batteries. But that's just me. Again, I have no grounds to make that claim other than that's what I think. So take it or leave it. My opinions are free at no extra charge. So you got that going for you. It's a 2-for-1, ladies and gentlemen. Not only do I give you stories and entertainment, but you also get my opinions at no extra charge. What's not to love? All right. Let's go to Utah this time. This one's much shorter. And it says, so many people, it seems, have seen full-bodied apparitions that are as clear as day. Sometimes these spirits interact with the living, and sometimes it's like they're trapped in time doing the same things over and over again. While I've never been lucky enough to see anything like that, I've seen many shadow people and have sensed that someone is around. There was even something that used to call my name when I was a child that did a perfect impression of my mom, usually when I was home alone. So I find it really funny now that it's over that the only thing I've ever seen that has been solid and looked like a living person was a hand. Yeah, just a hand. After a lifetime of wanting and waiting to see a full-bodied apparition, I get a hand. This happened in the fall of 2007. My husband and my husband's son and I were living in a crappy apartment in Provo. Again, this is Utah, that I had mentioned in another encounter story I wrote. My husband worked graveyards at Stouffer's, Stouffers, and would come home at around 4 or 5 a.m., depending on how quickly he could clean the machines used to make and mix the food. One night at around 2:30, I woke up and turned over onto my other side facing the door to our bedroom. Much to my surprise, I noticed a man's fingers and part of his hand curled around the edge of the door, just above the doorknob, just as if someone were standing outside of the room and were about to pull the door the rest of the way open. I called out to my husband's name, and the hand let go of the door and was gone from view. Still thinking it was my husband, I got out of bed and walked over and opened the door and looked out into the front room, and it was then that I realized there were no lights on. This seemed weird to me because if he was home, he would at least have turned on the kitchen light. So I called his name again, and there was still no answer. So I flipped on the bedroom light and the hall light and quickly walked across the living room and turned on that light as well and began to search the apartment. There was nobody there. And I'm sure it couldn't have been an intruder because I didn't hear anyone open a door or a window to get out or leave. I didn't sleep very well the rest of the night and was really happy when my husband got home in the morning. Yeah, that's weird. see, just a hand. I don't know if that would be more or less haunting. Because at least if you see the full apparition, you know you have a representation of what you're dealing with. But if you just see a hand, then your imagination goes wild. Oh my God, what does it look like? That would be weird. I don't know. Hard to tell. Just a hand, though, ladies and gentlemen. It counts, though. Yeah, it's like The Thing. A.J. McCammond says, just like The Thing on the Addams Family. Yeah, exactly. That hand would walk all over. That's funny. I just love that show. Did you know? Here's a little trivia for you. Of course, the Addams Family show back in whatever that was, the 60s, I guess. It was in black and white. But did you know that it was that set of their house was actually pink? It was actually painted pink. And I guess it's because the colors that it created in the black and white spectrum was more vivid. Or the shadows or whatever, more vivid. So I thought that was pretty funny. It's pink. Good thing they didn't have color back then, because that would have ruined a lot of the effect. It was pink. The pink Addams Family house. You rang. That was Lurch. All right, so that was a good story. Just a hand, but it can still spook you. Even just a hand. All right, so the next one is coming from California. God, I got to use the bathroom. Oh, I didn't plot my course well tonight. So I'm sitting here with my legs crossed. All right, so California. This is talking about haunted places. I've always been one to believe in the supernatural, especially ghosts. But I've never had a personal experience until I moved into my new house about 6 years ago. I live in a hilly suburbia, and my house has no previous owners, so it's difficult for me to sort out my story on my own. Little pink houses for you and me. That's right. Yep, that's right. Little melon camp. One night I was sleeping alone in my room, which is at the top of the staircase in my house, and when all of a sudden I abruptly woke up in a cold sweat. and felt the need to look in the direction of my closet. When I did, I noticed an oddly tall woman with long flowing white hair and a floor-length white dress on, just staring at me. Well, I immediately lost my breath and had to gasp to breathe again. When I could breathe again, she simply vanished. I see her at least once a month now, watching me when I awake from my sleep at night, and she never speaks. She just looks at me. Just recently, however, I had a new experience with this woman. I was looking into a mirror in my room fixing my hair when I saw her walking behind me, entering into my room. When I turned around, I didn't see her, but I felt a cold chill where I had seen her in the mirror. I felt a cold chill where I had seen her in the mirror. Oh, okay. I could not move my body, and again, I couldn't breathe. I don't know who this woman is or why she's in my house, but I feel her presence more every day and wonder what her purpose is. I've never seen this woman before in my life, but I'd really like to know who she is. Yeah, that's weird. I don't know. Very strange. Maybe it's who you are that's more interesting. Maybe there's something about you that drew her there. It's hard to know. I don't know if, I have seen a full apparition one time. And it was just a quick argument that I was with a significant other ex. She and I were arguing, and it was in my old Victorian home back in Minnesota. And I just decided, because I just didn't want to continue. And it was night already. I was already tired. And obviously I knew that the discussion just wasn't going to go anywhere. It's just, you can only talk so much. And when you hit the wall, you hit the wall. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go on the couch. I'm done. So I went out on the couch and laid down, and I was out there for maybe 15, 20, maybe 30 minutes. And I started to kind of, get relaxed. It was, nothing I could do. I'm one of those people that, like, some people can't sleep after they've been arguing, but it's like, that's the one thing I can do is if I've been arguing like an emotional relationship and you argue, it's just like, I can go right to sleep and just forget about it for a while, which I think is, maybe good. I don't know if it's always good for the relationship, but it's good to just disconnect. So I'm out on the couch and I'm just relaxing and laying there, and my eyes are getting a little heavy, and all of a sudden I see who I thought was my significant other ex walking from the dining room into the living room where I'm laying down and walk past me and going into the kitchen. And of course I wasn't going to say nothing because it was like, I just thought, God, she's trolling to continue this and I just can't do it. So I'm just going to lay here quietly. But I noticed then as I'm laying there, the light never came on in the bathroom, or in the kitchen rather. I'm like, what is she doing? Just standing there in the dark? So I'm like, oh God, okay, I got to engage again. Okay. So I get up. I'm like, what are you doing? I'm sitting up on the couch. Just kind of, the kitchen's off to my left, the entryway. Like, what are you doing? She's not answering. So I stand up and go look in the kitchen, turn on the light, and nobody's there. Like, what? What just happened? Wait a minute. She just went in here. And I, on the other end of the kitchen, there's one of those flippy doors that goes both ways. It's like I don't know what you call them, but they open either way and they're kind of spring loaded. And I would have heard that if she had gone out that way. And I'm just perplexed. I'm like, what happened? So I go through the kitchen, through that flippy door, go back into the dining room and look back in the bedroom, and she's sound asleep. There's nobody there. And I'm like going, oh my God, I just saw an apparition. So that was the one time that I can say that I've seen an apparition. Now I do postulate that maybe we see apparitions more often than we know, just because oftentimes people have seen apparitions that look like other people, like they're really there. There's no difference between a physical person standing there and the apparition, but they then we'll see them, boom, just disappear or fade right in front of their eyes or something. So I often wonder how many times have we all maybe encountered one of these really solid apparitions that maybe after we just pass, they just fade out. Maybe they do. But so we may all have seen apparitions and not known it, but this one I knew. So it was pretty weird. It was pretty bizarre. It wasn't frightening. I didn't feel frightened in the whole thing. I just figured, well, that house had quite a bit of activity anyway. So I figured, well, she probably didn't like the arguing. And I can't say I blamed her. I didn't much like it either. So, but it was pretty bizarre experience. True story though. That's one of my stories. Again, I've told these stories before, so for those longtime listeners, I'm sorry if I get redundant, but they just seem to come up from time to time, so it's worth rediscussion, I think. But the next one's coming from Michigan. I got family there, but let's see what's going on in Michigan. It has to do with haunted places. This one's a long one. This may very well be the last story of the night. It says, as it seems people seem to have enjoyed or even sympathized with my first encounter, I thought I'd also pass along this one. In the story about the most recent house I lived in with my mom, I was troubled by what I thought were aggressive spirits, or perhaps just one. In it, I'd mentioned the house had a bad aura, and in this tale, I'll recount the story of it. Unfortunately, it seems that when I lived with my family, we almost always had some sort of spirit activity. It was just simply something we learned to live with. My family, I lived with my family, and we almost always had some sort of activity. Yeah, I just read that. Sorry. Sometimes it was easy to ignore. Sometimes it was hard to ignore. Other members of the family were, and still are, skeptics. And when even brought face to face with the paranormal, they feign ignorance. How difficult is that for someone like my sister or me growing up when our mom embraced it and our dad just refused to acknowledge it? Some people may like to think that houses have a life of their own, that they're a living, breathing things, and that they absorb the energy around you, happiness, sadness, anger, and the whole 9 yards. I agree. I believe they do as well. If that were true, then the house in Michigan we spent about 3 years in definitely was angry or even sick. And it definitely looked sick. An old shack of a house with drooping window frames, dirty green siding, and a walk-in porch that looked like it was ready to collapse almost any second. To be honest, the house fit the whole haunted house theme, but it simply didn't end there with the looks. As soon as you stepped into the house, the heavy wave of resistance would be placed on your entire being. Not only did you constantly feel like the house didn't want you there, but you also felt like someone was always watching you. It was an awful feeling that would stay by you as long as you were in the house, and anyone with a skill for the paranormal or not would feel it. Like most houses that show spiritual activity, we had some classic signs such as invisible footsteps, doors opening and closing, and things being moved around or displaced. One of the interesting ones were footsteps coming up through the back of our garage, up the stairs, into the hallway, and then finally knocking on the back of our kitchen door. When we go to answer, no one would be there. Another problem is that my sister constantly had, and only her, was that when she was using the bathroom, the door would constantly open on its own. It's difficult to recount everything that happened in that house in the proper order that it happened, so I'm going to tell you the events that remain most prominent in my mind. Shadow people. My mom had one of those instant Polaroid cameras, and it was around 8 o'clock at night. I can't recall the day of the week, and most of the lights in the house were off because we were just trying to save on electricity. And I'd found her camera and was running around the house just taking pictures. When I'd made it into the kitchen, I simply took a random picture. When the camera ran out of film, I sat down on the couch in the living room with the rest of the family and we looked at the pictures. Most of them were just pictures of our home. But in the kitchen, that photo was strange. Just about a foot off the floor above the kitchen counters were what appeared to be two shadowy figures. They were just heads, torsos, arms, and legs. There were heads, torsos, arms, and legs, and they were arguably people. Well, everyone got excited about the picture right away. I mean, how often do you get an authentic pictures like this? My stepfather quickly took the picture, scanned it for a second, and then began to make up excuses. "Oh, it was a reflection," he said. "It was night out and we don't have any glass cabinetry," I replied. It was light from another room, obviously. The only light on was the living room, 2 rooms away. "Well, there's gunk on the film." "In the shape of 2 people and only on a single frame?" The conversation went like this for a few moments until my stepfather gave up. He refused to give me the photo back, and I never saw it again. Besides ghosts, my sister's room seemed to have the most of the ill feelings in the house. For that the house had for us almost radiating from its core. Many times we couldn't even get friends and family members to stay at our house. And when we did, they refused to stay in my sister's room, and they refused to let us leave them alone in any part of the house as well. Even animals avoided the room at all costs. They would follow us like lost puppies throughout the house. But this is not my tale, but a tale my sister told me. One night she was in her room lying on her bed trying to get to sleep. Something was keeping her awake. But she wasn't sure what it was yet. All she knew was that she wished she had a door or even a blanket or something to cover the door leading to her toy closet, which was half as big as her room and for some reason scared her beyond belief. She was facing the wall when she heard something and rolled over, and standing at the side of her bed was the figure of a man in a ghostly light blue color just staring at her. At this point, she screamed and ran into my room, where she stayed for the next week. My mom's room was an interesting room. See, the whole house was kind of on a raised foundation, so even on the first floor, it was hard to try to climb into the first-story window. You'd need a ladder or something to boost you up. My mom's room, for some reason or another, was even higher up and had only one window, which for one reason or another had been permanently glued and nailed shut. That's funny. This window right to my left was nailed and screwed shut. One day my mom went to her room to get something, but discovered the door refused to open up. Stranger still, the door was unlocked. Banging on the door quickly showed us that no one else was in the room. The only option we had was to remove the hinges from the door. After about 40 or so minutes of work, we managed to get the door out of the frame, and what we found was a queer sight. My mom had owned an old world colonial dresser made out of thick, heavy, solid oak wood. The thing was heavy enough as it was without the drawers and clothes in it, but with all 6 drawers in it, all of them filled with clothes, the thing was damn near impossible for any less than 3 people to push out of the way. The dresser somehow managed to make its way all the way across the room in front of my mother's bedroom door. At this discovery, we climbed over the dresser and then proceeded to push the dresser back to its place. This event happened several more times before we eventually moved. Another interesting aspect of her room was a small quarter-sized hole above her bed, about an inch deep, that refused to be sealed shut. Now, it wasn't for the lack of ability, because both my mom and stepfather were well known for their ability at carpentry, and indeed, at the time, they even owned a local company. It appeared to us the hole simply refused to be fixed. But it either a few hours, a day, a week, or even a month or so, the end results were always the same. The hole would come back. And we never did end up patching that spot on the wall. All in all, the events in this house were nowhere near as bad as depicted in my more recent run-in, but with the paranormal that I published on another site. but it still wasn't very pleasant. As far as the house goes, we did eventually try to learn more about the house to try to figure out why it was so angry. But the small town I lived in didn't keep accurate records of anything in our town until later, and we were mostly met with dead ends. We had to go on by what locals were able to relay to us, and from what we were told, a long while back, a husband came home early to find his wife cheating on him, and he shot his wife and the man in bed and then hung himself on the tree that sat in front of our home. Was that why the bedroom was always trying to prevent access? Perhaps the hole in the wall was from a bullet or shrapnel from a gunshot? I can't say for sure, but I'm still going on hearsay. But what happened to us in that house while we lived in was very real. I swear to you all of this to be true. Wow, that's crazy. That might just be an angry house, but it sounds like there's some very active apparitions there. So there's obviously a lot of pain. What is Brian? What is he saying? Bomber? I'm looking. Brian, does anyone know how to find Brent's podcast that dropped today? Yeah, you should be able to find it on Pandora, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, Stitcher, Chatbox is another one. Any podcasting application you're using, just search for Paranormal Portal, and you should find it there, Brian. So I hope you check it out. Thank you for asking. And if you have a problem, just email me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com, and I'll send you a link directly. But yeah, should be able to find it. If you have problems, though, let me do this. Here is our copy. Let me put this in the chat. This is our a link to our show that's on Stitcher. We just started broadcasting on Stitcher as our newest platform for the podcast. So trying to get people to populate it, and you can see on that link, nobody's rated the show yet. So I'd love some great ratings. Now, I don't want you to do it unless you really honestly feel like you like the show and want to give it a good rating. So, I want at least the ratings to be genuine. So if you don't like the show, just never mind. But if you like the show, please rate it. I'd love that. So anyway, I just read good one, Ethan, and then was talking at the same time. I was going to say anyway, but ended up with anyone. So, all right, guys, that's all I got for you. I'm going to miss you for the next 2 days, but Don and I will be back on Wednesday, and we'll be sure to do our best to entertain you then. I love you all. Be good, be kind, be nice. Take care of each other. Help each other out. Find the magic in every day, and remember to laugh as much as you can. All right, guys, that's it for us. And take care. If you've got anything paranormal of your very own you'd like to share, email it to me at paranormalportalradio@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook. Please be subscribed to our YouTube page right here, and check out the podcast. So, all right, guys, that's it. Love you guys, and good night. Sweet dreams.